When I was 13 years old, my father got a job which took us out of the city. We moved from Philadelphia to a suburb a little less than an hour away. The house we moved into was originally built 150 years earlier and served as a schoolhouse. It has since been converted for more modern function and had an addition recently built onto the back. The house belonged to my father's boss, but since his boss recently moved, we were offered the house to rent out at a very decent price. Now, technically, we were in the suburbs, but on the outskirts. The house itself stood not in a development, but on a country road that led to a quarry. The road cut through a forest, so there were thick trees running on both sides, except for fields to the immediate right and left of the house. Corn was planted here during the summer. This location of our new home was fine for my father, who was big into hunting, regularly taking trips into the country each fall and winter to hunt. But as a city kid, this creeped the hell out of me. My mother loved the idea of living in the country. She was, and still is, into horror films and books, and so the place had a kind of gothic ghost story feel for her, which she liked. The only neighbours we had were an elderly couple, whose house was across the road from the field to the left of our house. If you were looking at our house from the road, they were constantly calling my dad for help with one thing or another. Random household projects mostly, so often know that I wasn't sure how they managed before we moved there. Eventually, I started going with him to lend a hand, which I wasn't exactly thrilled about. Physically, I'm built like my father, not very tall and fairly strong without needing to work out. But mentally, I'm more like my mother, introverted, interested in books. So doing manual labour while having to pretend to be interested in whatever the old guy, Bob, was talking to us about, well, not really my cup of tea. Bob was a serious guy. His conversations mostly consisted of weather, crime in Philly, Operation Desert Storm, and what grade I was in, which he never seemed to remember, and so asked me practically every time I came over. His wife, Claire, would bring us iced tea and cookies, would also talk to us for a bit here and there. After a few weeks' dinner invites started going back and forth between our families, and my mum got to know the neighbours as well. Claire, my mum and I agreed, was much more interesting than Bob, because she liked to talk about the history of the area and tell stories about our neighbours, both current and past. She told us our road was haunted by the ghost of a boy from the 19th century. He was struck and killed while walking down our road by an ice wagon while he was on his way to school, my current house. His ghost could be seen walking down the road sometimes, but mostly by pregnant women. Not sure why that was the case. My mum asked Claire if the ghost boy was ever said to be in the schoolhouse. Claire said she had never heard of that happening, and that the reason the boy was still seen was because he was still trying to get to the schoolhouse. She figured if he actually made it, he would then move on, never to be seen again. Claire asked my mum if there was a particular reason she was asking, and my mum said that things sometimes seem to move around the house. Sometimes things go missing. I remember feeling surprised and a little hurt that she kept this cool and creepy info from me. Claire asked the most logical question, if it could be me or my dad moving or taking things, but my mum said no. She noticed these things happening while my dad was at work and I was at school, which ruled us out. Claire got quiet after this, and Bob kept the conversation aimed at Saddam for the rest of the evening. It was dark when my parents and I walked down the field road to our house, and I remember looking for the little ghost boy that I pictured looking like Coffin, walking down the road, swinging a bundle of books cinched together with a belt. Time passed at the schoolhouse, and I tried to be more observant of things around the house. I looked every day for the ghost boy as I was at my bus stop, or doing chores outside. I pictured him countless different ways, talking to me and becoming friends. Leading me to the treasure in the woods, helped me get revenge on the bullies that stuck gum in my hair and tripped me as I was getting on or off the bus. Other times, he was an angry ghost and would push me under the school bus in a sick reenactment of his own death. Or he would push me under the bus in order to have a friend to keep him company in limbo. Anyway, I never did see the ghost. I did start to notice what my mum mentioned to Claire about things going missing or being moved. It actually seemed to be mostly my things or food from the kitchen. My room was in the new addition and it was taller than the rest of the house. Against one of the walls in my room was a small door which led to an attic space above our kitchen, which was part of the original schoolhouse. I used to go into the attic because I thought it looked old and creepy, which to me meant a cool place to read. But after the umpteenth spider encounter in there, I abandoned all hope for my attic hideaway. Over time, I noticed that some shirts of mine had gone missing. Sometime I wouldn't be able to find the book I had been reading. Other things that I've been spending a lot of time with, like an NES controller and a pocket knife my grandfather had given me when we moved to the country, had gone missing as well. Sometimes things would be damaged. I remember one night I was reading Christine by Stephen King. I would read after homework each day, and usually through until bedtime, only stopping for dinner. Sometimes I would do the classic flashlight under the blanket if I wasn't sleepy or if the book was exceptionally good. Christine was one of the exceptionally good ones, and I stayed up until the flashlight died around 1:30 a.m. I clicked it on and off a few times to make sure the batteries weren't toast, and I pulled the sheet down to free myself from my cocoon. I was reaching towards my nightstand to put Christine down when I noticed movement from the other side of the room. I thought it was my cat at first, but then I remembered it had gone missing right after we moved here. My dad said that it was probably killed by some predator in the woods. Then I thought that it was my dad in my room, and I was busted again for staying up late. But this figure seemed too small. Plus, my dad wasn't the type to sneak around. If there was a problem, he was right up there in its space. I went so long looking into the corner of my room that my vision started generating all kinds of strange shapes in the dark, and I began to doubt I'd seen anything at all. Then it moved, which refocused my eyes. I can only speculate, but my stillness must have been misinterpreted for sleep. I've always been a fan of monsters, and from what I could tell, this seemed most like a goblin to me. It had a large head on a thin neck, long pointed ears and nose, long limbs and a short torso. It was completely black, like a moving shadow. But when I looked towards my window, moonlight was reflected of its iridescent eyes, and I got a glimpse of bluish skin with a rough, pebbly texture. Luckily, my body's reaction was to freeze, and so I didn't give myself away. The creature opened a small door across the room from my bed and entered into the attic space. I scooted up and put my back against the headboard and resolved to stay awake and keep watch for the rest of the night. When I woke up, the sun was pouring in through the window. I looked at the clock on my nightstand, but before I saw the time, I noticed my book. The front and back covers were a shredded mess, like Freddy Krueger tried to read it. It was a Saturday, so no school for me, or work for my dad. However, he always managed to find some job to do outside, and soon my mum and I were left alone at the kitchen table. I told her what I had seen and showed her my book. She asked me to follow her to the laundry room and showed me something that made my blood run cold. My missing shirts were in a cupboard about the dryer. My mum took them out and spread them across the tops of the washer and dryer. There were 3 of them, and they looked as though they had been run over with the lawnmower. There were several clear slash marks across my favourite Spider-Man shirt, and the other 2 just looked like a scrambled mess. I had a feeling of dread that made my breakfast sit like a brick in my stomach. Eventually, my dad came in smelling of wood smoke from the piles of leaves he was feeding into the burn barrel. The 3 of us sat down at the kitchen table, and my mum and I laid out our evidence and told him what I saw. He laughed at us and said it must be a raccoon, that we were still not used to the country and that we needed to stop reading creepy books. He said he would set a trap in my room and that he would catch the raccoon and boot it outside. Then we'd look in the attic for any babies and eject them as well. The plan sounded solid to me, and I began to doubt myself and the reasons for the missing and damaged items. Maybe it was just some ballsy raccoon. They're clever too, so maybe it knows how to open a small door in my room. I don't know. This is just the stupid crap I was thinking. My dad went to the farm supply store later on that day, and he set up a wire mesh humane trap in my room. He warned me that it would get noisy, that the raccoon would be pissed, but there would be no danger. He said if the raccoon was caught, come wake him up, and he would caught it outside. I'd asked him to get me some batteries for my flashlight while he was at the store, and he did. So I was as armed and prepared as I could make myself. My book was still readable, but I didn't want to burn through the batteries in my flashlight, so I wound up going to bed around 10 p.m. Sleep came pretty easy to me, and the next memory I have of that night was waking up to a horrendous metallic screeching sound. I scrambled to grab the flashlight beside me in my bed. I clicked it on and aimed it into the corner of my room. What was there was no raccoon. It was pretty much as I remembered it, short, yet long-limbed, bluish-grey turtle-like skin, reflective eyes. It looked enraged and was holding the humane trap my dad had set in its hands. The trap had been ripped in half, which I realised later was the source of the metallic shrieking. When the beam of my flashlight hit the creature, it stopped moving immediately, freezing much the same way I did the previous night. It bared its teeth at me. The top and bottom rows were full of sharp-looking needle-like teeth that were about 1 inch to 1.5 inches long. They meshed together perfectly, like a zipper. With the hand that wasn't holding the flashlight, I reached down next to my bed and grabbed the other item I had with me. It was something I had with me more days than not. An old tennis ball my best friend gave me when I moved away from Philly. We played with this thing all the time, mostly just catch, but sometimes whipping it at each other when one of us wasn't paying attention, or bouncing it back and forth when we were walking home from school, or if we were sitting on the sidewalk talking. Neither of us owned it, and we could never remember where it came from, but one of us always seemed to have it with us in our backpack. It was a lucky charm almost. It never rode into the sewer and always seemed to avoid dog shit in the street, though there were some close calls. Well, I grabbed this ball and gently lobbed it to the creature's feet, and I said, "Friend?" It dropped the pieces of the trap it was holding, and the sound made me jump a bit, but the creature remained where it was and picked up the ball at its feet. I brought it close to its face and inhaled deeply. At that moment, I heard my dad charging up the stairs and running through the hallway, yelling my name. I looked to the door, and when I looked back at the goblin, as I thought of it was gone. My dad ran into my room, and I told him I had no idea what happened, except that I heard a light noise that must have woken me up. He held up the pieces of the trap and stared at them without talking. Then he said to go to sleep in his room, and he would sleep on the couch. I said I didn't want to do that, but he said he was already sleeping on the couch, and to just go to his room. I didn't know what was more confused about, the creature in my room, or why my dad was sleeping on the couch. The following day, I told my mum what had happened, and she said that she was having lunch with Claire and would ask her if she had ever heard anything strange about the house besides the story about the boy and the ice wagon. While she was at lunch at the neighbour's house, I braved the spiders of the attic space once more. I was looking for the goblin, or at least some signs of it. I only found one strange thing, but I don't think it had anything to do with the goblin. On a back wall of the attic, tucked away in the corner, was a crude painting of my house. The painting was very simply done, and looked very old. The addition to the house was not in the painting, which, to me, confirmed that it was old. The house in the painting looked empty. All of the windows were black. Only the attic windows seemed to have some difference. There were 2 dots of yellow paint among the solid black of the window, like 2 luminous eyes. When my mum got back home from lunch with Claire, she looked pale and went to lie down for a while. By the time she woke up, my dad had already finished with whatever he was doing outside and was back in the house. I felt awkward asking her about what she might have learnt at lunch while my dad was around, so I held off. The next day was Monday, and I woke up without any disturbances through the night. All day through school, I couldn't concentrate, and when I got home, I rushed in to finally talk to my mum. But I found my dad home early from work. My mum looked like she had been crying, and I had the feeling I'd interrupted something. I asked what was wrong. My dad said that my mum wanted to move, but that financially we were unable to. I got excited and asked if we were moving back to Philly. My dad looked very disappointed with my question, shook his head and left the room. I asked my mum what happened. She told me that my dad didn't want me to know, but after a few minutes of wearing her down, she gave in. Claire told my mum that the family that lived here before us, my father's boss and his family, had experienced many of the same things we currently were. This started years ago with missing pets, missing and moved things in the house, strange sightings, even attacks in the middle of the night while everyone was in bed. The story goes that they were so plagued by these things that a priest was called in to bless the house. During the blessing, an inhuman scream could be heard throughout the house, going from room to room until it was coming from the kitchen. The only way to exit the kitchen without going through any of the blessed rooms was to leave the house. Our front door opened directly into the kitchen. Well, as the priest was closing in on the kitchen, something burst out from a space behind one of the walls. A small, bluish-grey creature that looked like a demon, Claire had said. I wasn't sure how she knew what a demon actually looked like, but then I didn't know what a goblin really looked like either, so I couldn't fault her. Well, the creature bursts out of the wall, screaming, and runs across the room and out the door. Claire happened to be outside her own home at the time, watering her vegetable garden, and she claims to have heard the screaming and saw a strange creature running down the road and into the cornfield across from her house. She saw some of the stalks swaying as it ran deeper in, but eventually the swaying caused by the creature blended in with the swaying caused by the wind. Years later, when the boss's family had grown by a couple more kids, they decided to build the addition. For some reason, the addition caused the strange things to begin again. Claire thought that it had been something to do with the walls being removed, and that somehow nullified the blessing. Whatever the cause, the family eventually decided to move, leaving the place open for us to rent, with no warning. The next morning, after I was told the story of the creature, I awoke to find the knife my grandfather gave me on my nightstand. That night, I placed a large marble, a shooter, outside the door to the attic. I woke up the next day to find my trusty tennis ball in bed with me. This didn't seem like demonic behaviour to me, but then I wouldn't really know demonic behaviour, would I? And so I stopped bringing it up with my parents, and they eventually stopped asking about it. I began leaving notes outside the door, but I never received a written response. So I started leaving questions with a box to check for yes, and another for no. Sometimes I would get an answer. One of the boxes would be punched through, gouged with a fingernail, I suppose. Thinking of my shirts and book, I initially asked the creature, "Do you mean to harm?" The no box was roughly gouged through. The next question, just to put to rest Claire's story. "Are you a demon?" "No." "Are you a ghost?" "No." "Did you kill my cat?" "Yes." I wasn't sure how to follow that one, so I just let it go. Sometimes I would leave food for the creature, just outside the attic door, like a piece of pie or some mashed potatoes. Some of the times I did this, I would find the next morning, roughly smeared on the plate and the remaining bits of crumbs or sauce, a crude, happy face. I considered this a thank you. Years passed with Goblin, and I swapping items and him answering the occasional question. I took to reading aloud in my room, in case he was around and wanted to hear a story. Sometimes he would initiate the communication. One time, when I was 15, Coffin warned me about my parents' divorce by leaving a photo of them on the plate where I left him some chicken for them the night before. In the photo, my parents were happy, smiling, but the picture was ripped vertically in half, separating them from each other. Another time, when I was 16, I woke up to find a warning from Goblin. He had left a picture of a ripped up school bus spread out all over my blanket. I took it to mean not to go to school that day, so I faked being sick and got to stay home. It was autumn, and it had snowed for the first time that year, the previous night. My bus hit some black ice that morning and was in an accident. No one died, but there were some broken bones. Another time, during the summer, I found a dead rattlesnake outside the attic door. Its head had been twisted completely off. Goblin had saved my life, and probably more than once, but I still knew nothing about him. I was okay with that though. Don't get me wrong, I was extremely curious, but I really didn't want to push him away from bombarding him with questions. When I was 17, my mum wanted to move. When my dad had left home, he moved into an apartment, leaving us in the schoolhouse. Now it seemed that my mum was ready to leave as well. I didn't know what to do. I really didn't want to leave Goblin. I was very introverted, and he was pretty much my only friend. I became depressed. I tried to figure out ways to stay, but I wasn't 18 yet. I couldn't live on my own. Plus, I was still in high school, so I couldn't work enough each month for rent. I decided to ask Goblin a few questions over the next week or so. "Do you know my mum wants us to move?" "Yes." "Do you want us to move?" "No." "Could you come with me to a new place?" "No." Sadly, it kind of made sense. He did seem bound to this place for some reason. I remember the story of him shrieking when he was forced out by the priest, and how he returned as soon as he was able. On my last night there, I left Goblin with a bunch of books I thought he would like, a few bags of chips because I thought they would last, since they were sealed, and the tennis ball that I loved to him the night we first met. the time he ripped the trap in half. As I was turning away from the door, I heard the handle turn. I looked back and saw something being pushed out from the 2-inch opening. It was a bracelet that seemed to be made of braided leather straps, woven around what I at first thought were small bones, but later realised were 2 of Goblin's very long teeth. There also seemed to be some tufts of cat fur, but I tried not to think too much about that. So, we moved. We were still in the same town as the schoolhouse, but I didn't have a car, so I couldn't get back to see the place as often as I wanted. I had a copy of the house key made in secret, and it still worked 6 months later, since the place was still without renters. I would borrow my mum's car on the weekend and go to the schoolhouse. I would let myself in with my key, leave things for Goblin, and just hang out for a bit, reading or listening to the radio. Little things would be left for me as well, like polished stones he must have thought looked interesting, and one time he left a drawing of 2 very simple figures, one tall, one short. They were standing next to each other, and between them floated a green orb, which I understood to be our tennis ball. Though I didn't know it at the time, this was to be my last gift from Goblin. More time passed. I finished high school and was being pressed into going to college or joining the military by my father. No one had ever moved into the schoolhouse in all this time. I'd been working at a hardware store in town, so I would visit Goblin here and there. I was almost 19 now, not really concerned with anything, just working, paying my rent, quietly existing. And then one night I went to the old schoolhouse to find that it was no longer there. The owner had paid to have it torn down. There was no warning, and why would there be? No one had lived there for a long time. But the worst thing by far was that there was no message from Goblin either. Nothing. I was devastated. Night after night, I camped at the spot where the house once stood, looking for my friend. New things that I left for him were still there when I came back. Signs had been posted on the property advertising a future housing development. I tried searching the woods and at the quarry, leaving notes, leaving food, books. Nothing was ever taken. Nothing was ever left for me. I went back to that property at least 3 times a week, always wearing the bracelet, just in case there was the slightest chance it could help. This was my life for the next 2 years. I eventually forced to stop because the houses had been built and had been moved into, and the space I was now lurking around, the space where my bedroom used to exist, was now someone else's backyard. I never saw Goblin again. I hope he was freed when the schoolhouse was torn down. I hope he didn't die in a pile of rubble, crushed together with his books and trinkets. I still have no idea what Goblin was, or why he lived in the attic, or why he befriended a weird, sad kid. Since then, I've grown stagnant as a person, not moving on. I haven't gone to college, and I can't bring myself to move away. Just in case Goblin is still around, trying to find me. I'm just a quiet loser that works at a call centre, constantly thinking about the strange creature that used to be my friend. Hey guys, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. You can also leave a comment below. All feedback, good or otherwise, is always appreciated. If you have any creepy stories of your own, or of any topics that you would like me to cover, feel free to send them in via any of my social media. You can find all links to my social media in the description below. Until next time guys, make sure you lock your doors, stay safe, and I'll see you next video.